welcome to another edition of Harona. Today I have the pleasure of having a special guest, academic, a family woman, a businesswoman, politician. It is my pleasure to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Ameenah Gurib Fakim. Hello, Ma. Thank you and welcome to Harona.
Thank you for having me.
It's a beautiful country you have here, Mauritius.
Thank you. Thank you. We hope to make it even more beautiful. Do beautiful actions.
It is. The Harona show, it's generally we talk to mentors, people, achievers, politicians, business people, community organizers, activists, a little bit of the history growing up, education, and where they are. So we'll begin with you, your education, Mauritius.
I was educated up to the A levels in Mauritius, and I had the great joy and pleasure to have attended a convent school where I was educated by Irish nuns. And I followed the British system of education because I did the A levels here, the Cambridge A levels. And then I went to the UK and did all my graduate and postgraduate studies in the UK. And I finished with a PhD in organic chemistry.
Chemistry?
Yes.
Female?
Yes.
African?
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Yeah.
How did you get into that?
Well, I had very motivated teachers, and I think from a very early age they infected me with the virus of science. And how did they do that? They made science very practical. They made science explain life around me. And I went to a school where there was hardly any infrastructure because it was a very new school. But to teach science, they actually took me to the field, they took me to the pond, the rivers, when I could see the way, the web of life. And then there were two big moments that really, really impressed me. One was men walking in the moon. The very famous moonshot moment, which happened in 1969. I was a very young child then. And then when I was finishing my A levels, there was the birth of the first test tube baby, baby Brown. And I thought to myself, if science can be so transformative, and I had the passion for science, why not? Having said this, it wasn't an easy choice because at the end of my secondary education, I went to see the careers guidance officer. And he looked at me coming through that door and he says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I'm passionate about chemistry." He looked at me and said, "You, girl, science? No, I would not recommend it."
Why don't you try the commerce?
Because he said, "There'll be no job for me when I come back. I'm a woman. Science is for boys." So I said, "Thank you, sir." I went home and my father said, "What did he say?" I said what he said. And he said to me, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to follow my heart."
And that's science.
And that's it. Science. And I went back to I went to the UK. I did my first degree. And then there was another very important moment there. I went into an industrial training placement with a big American chemist organization that was doing pesticide chemistry, organic chemistry. I saw again the rigor of science, the way research is done. And that was for me. And I went and got a scholarship and I did my PhD in organic chemistry. Again, followed my heart. But that's again the very important message to young girls is to always follow your passion. And I will cite Confucius here. I thought I had said this before, but I realized Confucius said it well before me.
Yes.
Enjoy your passion. Be passionate about what you do. Because when you're passionate about something, you will not have to work a single day in your life. And I've never worked a single day in my life because I always followed my passion.
And your person would be having fun with your profession.
Exactly. So my profession was my passion. It was my hobby, and I enjoyed what I was doing. And subsequent to my returning home, I followed a completely new track. With my background in organic chemistry, I started exploring the world of plants. And exploring the world of plants meant applying the knowledge I had gathered as a chemist, as a trained chemist, into something which is completely new. And I started exploring phytochemistry because when I came back, I joined the University of Mauritius. And I
As a
realized,
lecturer at
as
that
a
time.
lecturer at the time, to teach agricultural chemistry, and I realized quickly that the research, the infrastructure I was used to, to operating in the UK, it wasn't there, and I had to find something where I could contribute and I would succeed academically, and this would only come by producing novelty. Then you can survive in the academic world, because in the academic world, the mantra is publish or perish.
Yes.
So I had to find something very quickly. I realized that the chemistry I was doing in the UK was no longer valid here. I started exploring because the passion was still chemistry pushing me. And I discovered the wonderful world of plants.
And
And
this,
then
you started writing.
I started writing, I started exploring, I started building around it. And then, lo and behold, success comes to a prepared mind, as they say. And there was this project which came up with the Indian Ocean Commission, funded by then, because they didn't have the European Union then, the European Development Fund. And it was about a survey of medicinal and aromatic plants. And I thought, wow, that's it.
That's an opportunity.
That's an opportunity. So I went into this, and I started interviewing these old ladies about the use of herbal medicine. I was fascinated. And just like Obelix, they fell into that pot. Even today, I still feel that I have only scratched the surface in terms of knowledge that the African continent has, which remains to date unexplored. And yet, the potential to creating wealth in this area, in what I call the green gold that we have, remains unexplored. So I started into this, and mind you, it was not an easy track, because here I was, a Western trained scientist in a field like organic chemistry, probing weeds. I mean, it can't be serious. So I was a laughing stock of my colleagues, but I started developing very early on a very, very thick skin. And I published the very first database of an island of Mauritius, Rodrigue, the very first database on Rodriguan medicinal plants. And then, from then, 1995 to 1997, I had developed the entire database on medicinal plants of Mauritius and Rodrigue, and of course, I had covered the entire territory of the island.
Now they started paying attention.
They started paying attention then, but still, you become the butt of all jealousy and all the rest of it. But, you just carry on. You stay focused on what you believe in. And when I started this in 1987, it was a very, very small wave that was starting in this area, because I remember getting a couple of references from a colleague of mine at the time. And one of the articles was the UNESCO Courier, showing how traditional medicine from all parts of the world has in fact been at the basis of modern medicine. And yet there's nothing for Africa, because the transmission has always been oral. So here I was documenting for the very first time the herbal knowledge, complete herbal knowledge, because there have been other people who have tried to do it, but I adopted a very comprehensive approach. And then, yes, the tsunami started rising in the 1990s, where everybody wants to be treated exactly green. And then we went further, because at the time you started networking with other like-minded people on the continent. And then in 2009, 2010, we produced the very first African herbal pharmacopoeia. Now, why African herbal pharmacopoeia? We focused on the trading standards of African medicine, because many of these African medicinal plants, they don't reach the international market because they don't meet the trading standard, because they're not collected as per good agricultural practices, or they're manufactured as per good manufacturing practices. There's hardly any data. We had to rely on grey literature on the continent. So we did that. And now there is another initiative to do a second volume of these trading standards for African medicinal plants. So there's a huge boulevard in front of us in this area, which I call the African green gold, and which absolutely need to do something about it. But the challenge we have is the elderly, they're passing on, the knowledge is being buried with them, is dying with them. And the second other challenge that we have is climate change, and the impact it's having on the diversity of this continent. So there's a race against time. There's a race against time also in changing mindset, in making Africans understand that the history and the legacy that our elderly have given us, it's through this that we will be able to adapt to the vagaries of climate change.
It's true, this will adapt to the vagaries of climate change. coming back and going into lecturing,
Yes.
was that a deliberate act to influence the new breed? I am sure then perhaps university just began and a lot of young people. Did you say, I will now create the sort of opportunity I did not have growing up here so we can have a young male and female who can be educated in country, in science, and be passionate as I am?
Education was very much an issue when I was a young child because education was not free. And fortunately, I had visionary parents who had decided very long time ago that they wanted to give equal opportunities to the girls and to the boys. So I've only had one brother and we had equal chances. So I went to school, my parents paid for it. And education became free in 1976. So access to education is not an issue because it's free for all from the primary all the way up to tertiary. So it's accessible. Girls and boys have equal access. And when I was at university, I found that girls were doing better than boys in the sciences, right? And so, as you say, the literacy rate in Mauritius is well over 90%. So we have a population who is well educated and who is able now to think. And it's because of this education that a lot of women have been able to access jobs. And fortunately, in this country, there is equal pay for equal job done. Anyway, that's another issue. But in terms of getting access to education, that's not a problem. My problem is when these girls I was educating at university, when I see their career trajectory, many of them get stuck at middle management level. So the thing to do is how do you produce this break either in mindset, especially the societal factors which actually bring down many women. And this is true for Mauritius, it's true for many African countries as well. They are not really being given this support to help them move up the ladder more, faster. And this is this is where I feel that when you look at the leaky pipe syndrome for women, career movement and all the rest of it, you find that the trickle coming out on the other side is very, very thin. So we need to increase the trickle. But how do you increase the trickle is to ensure that more come through the pipe. We lose many on the way. But I think this is one of the reasons why we do not see so many women coming out, because societal pressure and women, once they've reached a certain career path, they feel they ought to spend more time with their family. Yes, we need to spend more time with the family, but we also need to design a structure where parenting is shared and a structure where the workplace becomes more mother-friendly. And interestingly, there are many more creches, for example, now coming up in big companies, so the women can take the kids there when they're very small. So the entire structure has to be relooked at. The policies have to be relooked at so that, for example, fathers can also take paternity leave, for example. This is very much the case in Scandinavian countries. It's only trickling down in some European countries. I don't know. I think in your experience, you've seen many African countries that have made it they have made it formal that men have to take paternity leave. So we really need to look at the laws that are kind of looking at the family unit that is helping women. And in Africa, we also really need to look at the rights of women and access to many things which we can discuss later, so that women are more present on the social scene.
The presence is there. Like you said, there's a lot of pressure. This is sometimes traditional, sometimes societal, sometimes deliberate on the part of men. Now, if you were to influence young men and encouraging that mindset, what role do you think men can play in making sure a lot more trickle through that pipe?
I think women don't want tokenism. Right? We don't want tokenism. We want things to be really looked at par. And, to be able to convince the men that they have to play a more active role, that education has to start at home, right? Change will happen one family at a time. I'll just give you an example. Well, I've got a son and a daughter. When they finish the dinners, I will not say to my daughter, go and do the dishes. I'll say to my son, you clean your dish, and she clean her dish. Right? So these are the kind of mindset that we need to instill. And when the woman is moving up the ladder, we need to have less stereotype, right? I grew up in a system where, as I said, I had just explained to you that I was told that science is not for me, for example. Now, if you look at the books, if you look at our books, which are being used to teach science or any other matter, any other subject for that matter, on the African continent, you find there are still many stereotypes. So we need to relook at this. The other thing we need to look at is the ecosystem where that girl is growing up in. Schools, for example, need to be much more equipped with basic sanitation facilities, so the girl doesn't have to abandon school 1 week per month. These are things that we really need to address. So the boy can be taught, I'm not going to say coerced, but they need to be kind of educated to be much more compassionate and to be able to help that girl child moving up. And again, the cheerleader has to be the father, the cheerleader has to be the brother, the uncle. All these so as to help the women. And this is not something that we are asking a favor. This is an economic issue. If this continent is going to move up fast, as I said, I've come up with cliches now, a bird cannot fly with one wing. Right? So it is an economic issue. And many countries have shown, developing countries, when they actually put in more women in the boards, more women in the workforce, the productivity increases by 2 or 3 points. So it is an economic issue. So we have to address these challenges up front. And we need to bring the men, we need to bring the boys and the young men on board to understand that they need to help that girl. As I said, we don't want tokenism. We want them to understand that she is there and she's a potential, worker, she's a potential colleague, but we need to work together. And this is something that, CEDAW has been addressing since 1995, but unfortunately, if you look at the indicators, since CEDAW, we have regressed.
We have. Now, looking at it, you're coming from a position of weakness, growing up, minority, Muslim, female, all the stereotypes that come with it,
yes.
African. You're trying to climb the ladder. How do you wade off all of these negatives to continue pursuing your dream, your passion, your ambition into success land?
Fortunately, I started in the academic world. And in the academic world, as I said, you either publish or you perish. And when you're publishing, fortunately, your papers get assessed blind, kind of blind. People don't know who you are. They will assess the quality of your work. So my messaging to myself and my messaging to my students at the time and to everybody is to always go for excellence. Excellence knows no gender. Excellence knows no border. When you're good, people will recognize you. And when you go for excellence and you sustain that excellence, you become a reference point. And this is how I transcended all this negative that you have mentioned so far. People, when you're publishing, they don't know you're a woman. They don't know that you're Muslim. They don't know that you are coming from a developing country. They will see who you're partnering with. They will see which are the labs that you're collaborating with, because all these adds credibility. So to become credible, you have to go for a culture of excellence. That's it.
Do well, do well,
do well all the time, and never compromise on the quality of what you're producing. Never compromise on the company you're keeping as well, because this is also very, very important.
Very important. Switching, in the world of academia, usually you bury your head in the books, publishing or perishing.
Yes.
And I think you chose publishing.
Yes.
You want to stay alive. How did that make it into business for you? Because they're two different. Academics usually focus on, let me get this, and they forget about the bank account and or the coming pennies and shillings exchange. How did you do the transformation to business?
I was hail from the academic world, and the mantra in the academic world is to publish or perish, as I've just mentioned. And one day I went to a conference in Europe, and I saw on the side events, they were producing all these herbal medicine and food supplements that were treating, that was looking at the condition called diabetes, because my research focus was on infectious diseases and also conditions like diabetes, because we have a very high rate of diabetes in Mauritius. And when I was looking at the literature which were accompanying some of this product, I saw many of my publications. And I thought to myself, well, this is strange. There they are using my data, using my research to give credibility to their products, and yet I'm getting nothing out of it. But I didn't do anything at the time because I wanted to move up the ladder academically at the university, and I ended up my career at the university being a deputy vice chancellor. I didn't become a vice chancellor because I wasn't given the job for reasons that we have mentioned before, all my negatives. And this is when I thought it's time to leave. And I had met a French guy who was already operating a contract research organization in Mauritius. And I said to him, I said, Jean-Louis, now is the time. You have always suggested that we do something. Now is something that I want to do. I want to translate my data into a business where the business will be focused on generating innovative molecule precisely from this biodiversity that we have. Now, in Africa, now is rising, but at the time we didn't see that, the notion of entrepreneurship, the notion of translating academic results into a business. We don't really have this ecosystem. As I've said, when you look at, for example, how if Facebook started, it started with a check from the philanthropist who gave it to Zuckerberg, said, go to Palo Alto and register your company. So his idea crossed the valley of death and became what we know of Facebook today. There are so many of these results which I refer to as being stagnant technologies, which are somewhere in the drawer of an academic, which doesn't manage to go on the other side to become a business. And here I had somebody who was prepared to go with me to set up this business. But I could not really set up a business per se quickly because I was still an academic on leave from university. I took the risk. And this is something I will always say to young people, learn to take risk. It is not something which is
calculated.
Calculated risk, right? And I stayed with the safety net that university provided me because I took leave of absence. And I said, let's try it. Business school don't take you to take risk. So you have to take a calculated risk. And I did that. And I started the business. And a few years later, I said to them, I want to retire from university because I don't see myself going back and teaching again after having, been in management and all the rest of it. Teaching is good. It's a very honorable job.
More money.
You have to earn more money and also more exciting things, as you move up. And as you're getting older, you want to do different things. So I did. And then, now why it's so important? Because while I was there for 4 years and the business was picking up. More importantly, it provided a space for young people to come and do training and improve their CVs. Because you always end up with a catch-22 situation. You have no work experience, it becomes a chicken and egg situation. So when these kids were coming over, they would have a certificate to say they have been trained, they have had exposure in industry, and it helped them. So this is the concept that we developed in Mauritius, the very first biopark, which could have acted as the buffer between the world of academia and full-fledged industry. And this is something that we have to nurture on the continent, the notion of translating academic results into business so as to provide space and job for our people. The African continent, if you look at World Bank figures, it's astounding. 12 million graduates landing in the job market every year, minimum. Right? We really haven't developed the notion of vocational and non-vocational areas, and yet to absorb this workforce, we need to move fast. And this was a prototype that we developed. And then in 2014, I was called to do something else, and I left.
And I left. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, more with Her Excellency Dr. Ameenah Gurib Fakim, and we will look at family life and politics. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Harona with my guest, Her Excellency Dr. Ameenah Gurib Fakim. We're here in her office in Mauritius, and wonderful country, really.
Thank you.
Now we're going into the balancing act. 2 children, a husband, you in the world of academic, in business, and all of this. How do you make sure the yo-yo is still kept in play?
You know, I was asking myself this question from a very early age. How do you do the balancing act? I came up with my own conclusion. You know, I have 24 hours in a day. I would love to have a full-fledged career. I would love to have a fantastic social life and a married, you know, parenting and all the rest of it. But there are choices to make. And the choice I made was to focus on my career and my family. So the social life became integrated into these 2 pillars. Which have been there all along. And fortunately, I had married somebody who was very happy doing his own things. And so he didn't see my career as a threat to his. He was very comfortable as a surgeon to be looking after his own business. In fact, I used to say, you know, when you used to be on call, this was when the time when the kid was asleep that I could keep on focusing on my work. So I made the most of the day, and during the day I was a mother, you know, in the morning, take the kids to school, come back, do the homework. I used to occasionally cook as well. And one thing that was also instrumental was house help. I did get house help from the very early age. My kids were very small. And so then just focus on what you enjoy. As I said before, passion. My work was my passion. So working till late, working on Sundays was no issue at all. So I was enjoying what I was doing. But my message to girls is that get a partner who will be indifferent to you, what you do.
A partner who may not be jealous of your own success,
Exactly,
so to speak.
That's right. And supportive. But he was supportive by being indifferent.
But then also he is an achiever, so
Yes,
you know,
yes.
you get driven.
Absolutely.
Both can influence each other
That's
into
right.
success,
That's right.
so to speak.
Yes.
Now we go to, you know, when you're parenting, we've all been there. I like to consider myself as a good parent.
Yes.
Time into, did you ever take a break to say, okay, now I'll do this year just to babysit? Oh, I will do this. Or do you just always say, you know what, it's still 24 hours. I'll do whatever I can for the baby, but I will still do that 3, 4, 5 hours of work if I need to.
I used to do 30 hours in 24 hours.
Interesting.
Right. And just to give you an idea, when I used to travel, I used to ensure that the Monday to Friday lunches were in the freezer. And the school uniforms were all ironed up and, you know, kept in the, because my mum used to come and babysit when I was away. There was, again, somebody to help with the other duties. And I never took a break from my career for the good and simple reason is that when you come back, you never come back. A, you might never come back. And B, when you come back, things have moved on so fast, and society does not, and institutions do not provide, up to now, right, that space for women to come back and join full-fledged. So if you're not there, you're fast moving back and you're completely out of touch. So I saw that coming and I decided I'm going to do the 30 hours and 24 hours and do both. And I would explain to my kids, sometimes you feel guilty because you're not there, so you tend to overcompensate as well. But communication with them has been good, even to date. I'm in touch with them every day. We do things together. My social life was when I used to take them to the beach and play with them. I mean, this is quality time I used to give them, and not quantity. And I have no regrets on that as well, because now they're both grown up and they have their own professions in their own right. And I can say to myself that I have been a good mother.
There you are, an accomplished academic, successful businesswoman, and then all of a sudden you threw yourself under this high-speed train. Politics. Why politics?
Well, friendly enough, I never chose the world of politics. The world of politics chose me, and I will explain why. I came back in 2014, September 2014, I recall, after having given a TED Talk. I did the TED Global, and I came back, and the journalist called me and said, ma'am, can we have a word? I said, yes. I thought she was going to talk to me about the TED Talk, because it's quite a prestigious thing to do a TED Talk, global especially. So I said, what is it about? She said to me, your name has been cited for president. I said, ma'am, you must be mistaken, because I have no political ambitions. And she said to me, can you give this to me in a statement the next day? And the next day I come in to work, and what do I see in one of the dailies? My TED picture, Ameenah Gurib Fakim, for president, small interrogation mark, right? People don't see the interrogation mark. They see my name, they see my picture, they see president. And this became a sounding board, and people said, why not? And when this became the sounding board, then the political parties came and said to me, are you interested? So my first statement to them was yes and no. Yes, why not? I can serve my country at the highest level. But I said no at the same time, because I said to myself, no, I don't have any big ambitions, because we are in a configuration where there were two big parties in coalition, and the party that was proposing me was a very small party mixed up of a few small parties kind of joined together to actually go for that election. And I said to myself, I'm a Muslim, I'm a woman, I have no political affiliation or take a risk. Again, second time I take a risk in my life. And I said, let's go for it. Then I got few challenges from a social religious group to say, women can't do this, women can't do that. And I said, look, I will just take the risk, let's run and see what happens. So the party presented me as the first woman president in my country. I came in with credibility. I came in with the fact that I was a woman from a minority. Islam is a minority in this country. So I said, well, let's go for it. And I said to them up front as well, I have no money for you. I will run, you'll run on my credibility. There's no money come from me. I will not campaign, because the post of the president, you should not be campaigning. It's a politically neutral post. So we'll see what happens. And they went with that condition, and lo and behold, in December, I was watching in my office, I had my laptop on, and at the end of the day I said to myself,
you became president.
Oh my God, I'm president.
How does that feel, serving your country at the highest level, against all odds? This wasn't a planned job. No. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't an ambition that you said, this is the end game. It happened by chance.
It was a huge privilege. It's been a huge privilege to serve my country at this level. And I am very happy I've done it. At a personal level, I've made history, because I'm the first woman to have been made president in this country. At the continental level, I'm the first African Muslim woman to be a leader. So it's been a huge privilege, and I've really enjoyed it. I would have hoped to have finished my mandate of 5 years, but for other reasons I resigned.
Let's continue on being president, and now you're shifting gears and you're going at a faster pace. You talked about neutrality, you talked about coming from a minority group. Did you get all the necessary support from government officials, from the state itself, and from all the other support entities around your presidency to steer and move Mauritius forward?
Yes and no. Because if I said no, because for what I wanted to do from the State House, I wanted the president to be one who would not be content just cutting ribbons. I wanted to bring in what I had earned over the years in terms of vision and in terms of addressing the needs of the African continent. Because during my mandate, I was appointed by the African Union Commission to be one of the 10 heads of states who will be looking at the higher education landscape of the continent. And how do you do that? You work with the private sector, you work with philanthropists, you work with international organizations, you do advocacy for science, because again, this is a narrative which is not very present on the continent. There are very few, now there are more leaders who can speak as engineers, who can speak as lawyers, who can speak as scientists. There are very, very few scientists still. One of the scientists we know is Angela Merkel. He's the chemist, like physicist, like scientists like myself. But there are very few who can actually bring that discussion on board. And yet, in September 2015, for the first time in UN history, UN has recognized the transformative power of science, because each SDG is a system, and it can only be, we can only deliver on the SDGs when our people have a good grasp of science. Because if you're looking at food security, if you look at water security, energy security, health issues, all these will be only made possible when people understand the language of science. And we have just seen how there are few women who are, looking at science. Agriculture is very science-based. And this is what I thought to myself, that we need to have this language of science, and we need to actually do something in terms of capacity building. So this was my vision when I came to the State House. I wanted the State House to be where thought processes happen. I wanted the State House to be alive. I wanted the State House where people would come, intellectuals would come, young people would come and discuss. I did that. I brought in Nobel Prize winners, I carried out workshops and all the rest of it, and I started even a PhD program on a pilot basis. And this is where I did not get any support, because people didn't understand what I was trying to do.
The vision was a little bit ahead of the country.
Exactly. The vision was that it's never been done before. Presidents are meant to be just signing documents and cutting ribbons here and there, and this was not my vision of what I wanted to do. So I didn't get the support there.
You are not a politician, so
I'm
to
not
speak.
a politician, yes. I was
And not being a politician, perhaps, finding and wriggling your way around, piecing some of these things together may be a challenge.
That's right. So maybe I was doing things, maybe I was overshadowing some people, and so the grass had to be cut under my feet.
So, maybe perhaps that's what happened. But then you look at a country like Mauritius,
Yes.
One of the smallest countries in the whole world entirely, to be president and to be influential figure. How do you see negotiations and powers? What kind of power were you given as president to be able to be seen as an equal in the international arena, dealing with bigger economies, bigger countries, and by and large, dealing with men at that height?
Interestingly, when I was increasingly being invited to many international forums, because I was a woman, because I was a scientist, because I was an entrepreneur, and because I was also an academic, right? So all these were put into the pot to get me invited to more and more of these major conferences. So the issue was not so much on me being a woman. The issue is on the narrative I was bringing to the table. And this is the narrative that institutions, like many multilateral institutions or intergovernmental institutions, they want to hear from leaders, right? Now, here is one thing. Doing is another, and I was doing both. I was bringing the narrative of science. This is when I went to address the COP21 in Paris in 2015 for the climate conference. And then the subsequent year, I brought in a very big workshop, the Women Forum in Mauritius, precisely to address climate change. That was in 2016. And it's only now in 2019 that we are saying that, oh, we need to look at climate change as a big threat. But I had started this conversation in 2016, immediately after the Paris meeting. Right? So I can feel that we have stagnated for 3 years because we haven't really taken it very seriously. We're talking about entrepreneurship. We're talking about youth employment. I wanted to do that by building capacity, by bringing quality training to the young people. You start something and you expect it to grow, because this is, at the end of the day, what donors do. Donors, when they give money to a country, I always say that donors give seed money. And it's our duty to expand on this and to grow on it, because they will not be able to sustain it. I'll just tell you a very, very simple thing. We have seen the major progression of South Korea. South Korea started after 1958, when they came out of the Korean War. They were a country with a per capita and the GDP at par with an average African country. Where did South Korea move? South Korea moved because it had invested in its own people. So my narrative is, invest in our own people. We need to put our hands in our own pockets. And in fact, one day I heard Jim Kim say when he was president of the World Bank, do you think we would have got where we are by depending on handouts? No. We need to strategize. We need to look at our strength. We need to see where we put our money where our mouth is. The short of the answer is put our hands in our own pocket to look after our youth. And this is the major challenge for the African continent. We have the youngest continent, so it's our duty as leaders to see to it that we don't make that become a tinderbox.
We see that, and we commend you
Yes.
and your likes for that. But looking at your presidency, what would you say, this is my proudest moment as President of the Republic of Mauritius? This one item I will cherish for the rest of my life that I've achieved as president.
The most important message I have, and in fact it is because of this messaging that I'm still getting invited now, post-presidency, to address, is to have been able to evoke and to bring the narrative of science, the narrative of entrepreneurship into the discussion. And whenever I get invited now, I get invited precisely because of that narrative, because it is such an important, such a key narrative into the development of this continent. Because Mauritius, as you have rightly said, we are a very, very small island. How did we manage to get to where we are? It's because we've had diversity of our people, the talent of our people. We have had, interestingly, diversified the economy. As per, every 10 years we've added something. We moved from a per capita of $200 to nearly 10,000. How do you do that in 51 years? So these are things, now we have diversified, but now we are at a crossroad. So I am happy that I have brought in the notion that science matters, investment in higher education matters, investment in our people matter. So this is something that I'm very happy, and I was using the State House premise to precisely address this forum in terms of discussion, in terms of dialogue, in terms of enriching the debate at that level. So this is something that I'm very, very happy that I've been able to do.
Any major regrets in your presidency?
I've never had.
Dreams that you've not been able to achieve, you wish you had. This was one thing that was passionate, that you wanted to drive, you pushed all your energies there, but the politics of things didn't just see it through.
The presidency gave me the platform, and I'm using that platform even post-presidency to do exactly what I had wanted to do. In fact, I set up my own foundation, and through the foundation, I'm starting doing girls in STEM. The science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and I have already got a grant from one major African bank to start this program. I'm collaborating with colleagues in Ghana, for example, and also bringing in eventually colleagues from other African countries. So we're starting that. So whatever I had managed to start, it didn't stop. It's living with me, and this is, I think, my legacy to the presidency.
Your Excellency, you didn't get to finish your 5-year mandate, and the design would have been that you wanted to see it through.
Yes.
You resigned, regrettably, I suppose. What would you say was the reason for this?
Well, I'll tell you the environment which led to my resignation, and then people can draw their own conclusion. When I started doing the advocacy for science, I had made it very clear to the organizers. In fact, I was approached by the Gates Foundation to start this advocacy. And I said, advocacy as a president's scientist is a very expensive enterprise. And I said that it is not, as I said before, it is not in the attribution of the president to be doing this, because we've had what we've had in terms of presidency since the Republic in 1992. I said it is not in the habit of doing that. So somebody will have to pay. Right? And it cannot be the Mauritian taxpayers. So we need to find a way of doing this, because the costs have to be covered. Makes good sense. It makes economic sense. I have been an entrepreneur before. And this is when the Gates Foundation, they don't deal with governments. They deal with foundations and they deal with NGOs. There was a foundation which existed, which has disappeared since, called the Planet Earth Institute, operating out in London. And one of the major philanthropists was kind of putting money for capacity building, and I've spoken to that forum in London in 2015. So this when they came to Mauritius and started a PhD program, again, as per my vision for capacity building. Then the Gates Foundation did the due diligence with them for 6 months, and then they sign up with that organization so that the money can go with the organization. It cannot go into the coffers of the state for obvious reasons. And then, because I was involved in many of these conferences, I was speaking at the World Bank, I was speaking at the State Department, I gave lectures at the FAO, to major conferences. So they gave me a credit card so that the expenses can come out of that fund, and then we can use the credit card for the expenses for these conferences. I had an identical credit card. Identical, because same bank, 8 numbers identical, and I made the mistake of using that card for for my personal purposes. And then when I realized the mistake, 3 months later, I'd reimburse the card, because I said to them, this is a grant money. Anyway, I have worked with donors before. You get a grant, you have to be accountable at the end of the first year before the grant gets topped up again. So I refunded, because I made a mistake, I refunded. Lo and behold, 1 year after I had refunded, my personal expenses, my bank details landed in the press. Allegations were made that this philanthropist was now a good friend of mine, with all the insinuation that this can compromise, can actually entail. And I had used charity money to go shopping. This was what coming out from here to the international press, that the president had used charity money for her own personal expenses and gone shopping with the money. It makes good headlines.
We press, we love that.
It makes fantastic headlines. And then by that time, I could see the design was not to see me there anymore in that space. So I did not resign. I was forced to resign. I was asked by the power in place to leave office. I said to them, I could leave, but I need to clear my name, because I'm an academic at the end of the day, and my name is my passport. But I was not given the chance to even do that. I was going to be taken to a tribunal and all the rest of it. So I said, okay, thank you very much. It's time for me to go. So I left.
Do you have any more further political ambition?
My ambition, as I said, has always been within the realms of what I can do and what I can contribute. I feel that I can contribute perhaps more through my post-presidency than being in office, if you see what I mean. I have much more freedom to live the dream I have for the youth, the dream I have for the continent, by being where I am.
On that note, we'll take a second break. When we come back, final words from Her Excellency Dr. Ameenah Gurib Fakim. We'll be right back, and this is Harana. Welcome back to Harana with my special guest, Her Excellency Dr. Ameenah Gurib Fakim. We're here in our office in Mauritius, and this is the last segment of Harana. You've been there, done it. A mother, 2 children, a wife, an academic, a businesswoman, a world leader. What's next?
Time will tell. I may have to take another risk.
And that risk may entail?
I don't know. I have always, I've never planned anything in my life. Everything that has happened, I've seized the opportunity. I've seen the potential, and I've seen through what is being proposed to me as being an opportunity to make, to improve for the better, whatever I was doing. And so who knows what the future holds. But I remain at disposal for my country if the country needs it. But I definitely know that the continent needs me, and I will be operational there. And not just the African continent, I get called also across the world now for major conferences. So it's, the future beckons. So I'm looking forward to it.
You're a voice of women across the continent of Africa. You would be one of the leaders who may have a major influence in the future of girls, women in Africa. Now, in West Africa, particularly in Gambia, FGM, it's one of those things. Parity is on the table. Across all of Africa, women feel their voices could be heard louder. They can participate more in they can bring more to that table of discussion, and they can be the second wing to that bird flying across Africa and moving the continent forward. What do you think are the major impediments for this?
You talk about FGM, we talk about violence against women, for example. Society has conditioned women in such a way that they have been denied precisely that voice. And I think what we need to do, instead of inciting women to just go out there and, speak, women will not speak when they are being beaten in their homes. The first reflex that they will have, at least in this country I know, is that they will hide. They will hide behind dark glasses, they will put makeup, they will do all sorts of things, they will not speak. So we need to produce an environment that the woman feels comfortable in, right? And this is where, again, we really need to relook at our laws. We need to look at our institutions. We need to look at the support that they can get. More importantly, they need support from women. And this is where, again, I have to say it, the worst enemies of women are women themselves. And I vowed to myself that I will never do that. I will not cite Madeleine Albright to you, that there is a special place in hell for those women who don't help women. I've given myself this task that I will help women. I will help girls. And the people who have been really against me for the past year, I will say it, they have been women, more women than men. They did not want to know the truth. They only want sensation, and they wrote a lot on it. But that's beside that. I'll just move on because I don't have time to waste on this kind of rubbish, right? But I think that we women who have made it, we have a big responsibility to see to it that we create that enabling environment for that little girl and those women who are, really in desperate situation to come and speak. And we need to be a vector to take that voice out and change the system so that change, again, one woman at a time. The condition of one woman at a time. We won't be able to change the world, but we will be able to build on what we have done so far. And it's possible. But we need to believe in that.
What's the message you will give to that girl today, listening, in any country throughout Africa, to say, well, I'm a minority, well, I'm not educated, well, my father chose the boy over me to go for higher education, well, my husband, well, I have children, I cannot do this, well, God is great.
God is great, is good, but I think God will also need us to help him a bit. And she has to start saying to herself she can do it. Develop that self-confidence, that she has the capacity. And she needs that mentor. She needs to have that role model to look up to and say, if she's done it, let me go and speak to that woman. Let me go and ask for help. Let me get out there and change my own livelihood because nobody will do it for her. So she has to develop that self-confidence to tell herself that she is as bright, as intelligent as anybody, as any boy. In fact, she can do better. But as I said, we women who have achieved, and I'm thinking of what Elaine Johnson, Sirleaf Johnson has done, Joyce Banda, and all these women who are there, and so many other women scientists, entrepreneurs, who have done it, to be that role model to that girl and to say that she has a door to knock on and she has the environment in which she will be able to thrive because she can do it. She can do it. There's no doubt about it. She can do it.
Now that we are coming to the end of the interview, any last words, any remarks you'd like to make?
I would say that, the world is going to be a better place if women together we create that future. And we need to keep on investing in ourselves, investing in our education. Take that girl by the hand, literally, figuratively, or literally take that girl by the hand. And it's our duty to do precisely this. Learn to take that girl by the hand and make a better future for her.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's been a
Thank you.
wonderful, wonderful opportunity to share this platform with you.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.